Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that some stories and discussions in this episode of Radiant Resilience may touch on sensitive and potentially triggering topics. These may include themes of war and combat, PTSD and depression, sexual trauma, infidelity, suicidal ideation, addiction and overdose, and religious disillusionment. Our goal is to share real life experiences in a respectful and empathetic manner, offering insights into the complexities of the human spirit and the journey towards resilience. However, we understand that some content might be difficult for listeners. We encourage you to prioritize your well being and discretion when deciding to listen. Please remember this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice or support. If you find yourself needing assistance, we urge you to seek help from qualified professionals or trusted support systems. Your mental and emotional health is important to us. Thank you for your courage and for joining us in a space of understanding and compassion. Welcome back, everyone, to Radiant Resilience. I am very excited about this conversation today. I think it is going to have so much good information. I have with me today Susannah Rose Stokes. After serving in 2 combat tours in Afghanistan as a Marine Corps officer, Susannah experienced a spiritual awakening that changed her life forever. Since then, she's dedicated her life as an energy priestess and embodied consciousness guide. She's served dozens of people in one-on-one and group ceremonies, guiding them in their own spiritual awakening. She co-founded House of Embodied Metamorphosis, a 508c1a faith-based organization that utilizes the metamorphosis method and their proprietary strain of psilocybin to facilitate powerful personal transformations through retreats and coaching programs. She authored, oh boy, how do I say that?
Generated.
Say it one more time.
Yeah.
Entheogenerated. Okay.
Yeah.
A comprehensive research study on existing research of psychedelics and their capacity to create individual and collective change. That's quite the bio, Susannah.
I know. And I love it because there's like at least 5 words in there that are like such a mouthful.
Yes,
So it creates
absolutely.
like this element of presence, right? We got to be like here in order
Yeah.
to really say it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, thank you for being here. I'm very excited to learn more about your story and jumping into the psilocybin stuff eventually as well. So, I'm going to let you start wherever you would like to start as far as your story goes with what you would like to share. I don't know if it starts from childhood or the military, whatever you would like. Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, I'm tuning into and feeling that energy of radiant resilience. Oh, whew, that is such a powerful energy because it is something that I think women embody a lot, especially right now. And for me, that did start in childhood because I was raised on a farm, an organic blueberry farm in Georgia. And there I learned about the resilience of nature. I learned about life and death. It was when you live on a farm, like things die. And
Mm,
that was my first introduction to that whole cycle of life and death and the impermanence of things. And growing up there, my father was a big and still is a big influence in my life and was like, "You seem like a leader." That's mainly because I was bossing people around by the time I was about 4 years old.
nice.
They called me the general in the household.
Did you have
So
siblings?
I did. Yeah. They're both younger, quite a bit younger. So I always called them the moment they were born. It was my brother was born when I was about 5. My sister was born when I was 7. I started calling them the kids. And I'd be like, "Oh, are the kids coming with us?" And my parents would be like, "You are also a child." And I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about."
That's
Um,
so funny.
so I've had to learn a little bit about play and being a child, but from a very young age, I started building that resilience, that process of understanding what does it take to really lead, and what does it take, honestly, to just live in the world that we're living in right now.
Mhm.
And so my father encouraged me to go into the military because that's where he found his resilience,
Mm.
was in the Marine Corps. And he often says everybody should be in the Marine Corps or go through Marine Corps training today just to survive the world.
Yeah, probably.
I'm like, I think that's right. I think that's not far off, because we are living in this time of great change. And of course, I'll speak to that later. But as I grew up, that encouragement to go through these programs that kind of hardened me a little bit, right? Gave me that strength, led me into the Naval Academy and then into the Marine Corps and then to 2 deployments in Afghanistan.
Mm.
And on some level, that created that resilience and that firmness and that ability to like withstand. And it also hardened me to create walls, right? And to make
Mhm.
me feel deeply lonely. So I'll say that going to war was something that created a sense of really like a destruction of who I was, right?
Mm.
Everything I'd learned growing up in on this beautiful kind of idyllic farm started to crumble. And it was in that resilience that I became the woman that I am today.
How long were you in Afghanistan both times?
Both times were 7-month deployments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Marine Corps does slightly shorter ones than the Army. The Army tends to do those like year-long deployments, which
Yeah.
that's a whole nother thing. But ours are often a little more intense because we're going to the centers of the fighting. So when I was there, I was in Helmand Province, and for my first deployment, I was leading a team of individuals who we all monitored and controlled the airspace over Helmand Province. Yeah.
So what was that like the first time that you went? Like when you get your orders to go over there, and obviously you've done all the training, your goal, I guess, is to serve like that, I guess. But so what was that like? What was going through your head when you get those orders and you have to fly over there and you're probably going to see horrible things and yeah.
It's so interesting because in my naivete, I joined for some reason thinking that I was going to do like humanitarian aid work.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know why I thought that. I'm not sure why I joined like the finest killing force in the world, thinking that I was going to do more like humanitarian aid. But I had this vision because a lot of what you see the military doing, or at least at the time before Afghanistan, you saw the military going down to Haiti and going into these places where there had been a disaster, and then they were helping to restore order. And so for some reason, I assumed that it was going to be like that, like a savior energy.
Mm.
And when I got to Afghanistan, I realized, oh no, we're not saving anyone,
Uh,
are killing people here, and in the sort under the sort of guise or the narrative that we're saving the people back home
mm.
and protecting them. And so I was actually one of the first from my class from the Naval Academy to go, because I ended up in a unit that was already set to go. And so when I went to school, they pulled me out of school 2 weeks early, like my specialty school, they pulled me out 2 weeks early to deploy.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
so I was like, it was like like the college and then school and then go and then
Oh, wow.
off you go. And it's ironic because I was like one of the few I feel like around me, because in the Marine Corps, everyone is excited to deploy. That's like
That's why I was thinking
yeah,
like that's what
the
you guys
goal.
train for. That's what
Yeah.
you're like. But then it's for those of us who are not in the military, that seems like such a strange concept to want to go do those things. But that's what you have trained for, and that's what you knew, that's what you're supposed to do.
Exactly. And I had been newly married. I got married right out of college. My husband and I had not really been together physically in the same place for very long.
Oh, yeah.
The whole thing was like, I did not want to go. I was not
Mm,
interested. I was probably one of the few Marines. I was like, no, thanks. I'm good. I'll go stay. I'll go do administrative work back home and I'll be in the training world forever. That's fine. But being on that deployment, that first deployment, definitely was a bit of a shock to my system. Not really because of going to Afghanistan, honestly. Like, I think being on the ground and on the land there was probably the best part. Like, it's a very sacred place, that land. But it was more realizing that I was still such an outsider. And I'd experienced some of this when I was in my early training in the Marine Corps. I realized I was such an outsider and I was a woman, which meant that
mhm,
I was not in the boys club. And that sense of loneliness started to set in. And then essentially that first deployment was me getting comfortable with and understanding depression. That was really like the first experience that I had with that. Very heavy, I would say, in that
mhm.
first year, or that first deployment, because and to be honest, what did I watch? Every single Sex in the City episode.
Nice.
Just to have a little taste of femininity, of something that was not war.
Yeah. Oh man. So then how long was it between your first deployment and your second deployment?
That's a topic for discussion that the military still is wondering how this happened. I ended up going back about 8 months later, and for the Marine Corps, that's not usual. Usually, they try to give you double the time that you went back. So if you're there for 7 months, they try to keep you home for 14 months at
Okay.
least, and then you go again. But because I seem to have this sort of cross-functional set of skills, and I was a woman, I was this unique, like, person that had all these things that they were looking for this next deployment. They were like, we need somebody who is this particular MOS, the Air Defense Control MOS. We need someone who's already been to Afghanistan, who knows the air structure there.
Wow.
We need somebody who is also a victim advocate or has some sort of collateral duty, like a second job. I was a uniform victim advocate for survivors of sexual assault. And then it was between me and one other guy. And because I was a woman, they chose me.
Oh wow.
And that ended up bringing me right back to Afghanistan. And on that first deployment, I had one moment. So by the second deployment, my reality was starting to crumble.
Oh,
And although I went with conflicted, I don't necessarily want to go, but I am still excited. This is still new. On that first deployment, I had a moment where I was watching the screen. We were watching one of the drone footage, and the drone was following a man who had implanted an IED, an improvised explosive device.
mm,
And I watched him drive away. And of course, because he'd done that, he's now the enemy. And
mhm,
so we're targeting him with a missile. And I start to think about that guy on the motorbike. And I'm like, who is this guy?
mm,
Who is this person? Not who is this target? Who is this person? And it started to really bring me into this man is probably a brother of someone,
mm.
a son, maybe a father. Who
Yeah.
is he? He's got a family. We target him. We drop the missile on him. You see a big flash of light, and he gets away.
Oh, wow.
He runs away. We see his heat signature run off. And I was like, what? That was incredible. But I heard everybody when we dropped it cheer, and I thought, oh my goodness. And it was in that moment that I had this like moment of insight and awakening, and probably my spirit guides came down and was like, hello, is this right? Does this seem like it's working? And so by the second deployment, I was deep in that process of disintegrating everything that I knew. And by that second time, when I was on the plane to the second deployment, I was in absolute, I cried the whole way. It was very deeply sad. Not only did I not want to leave my husband and our life together, which now during that second deployment was when our life together fell apart, but I also didn't want to go back to witness what
Yeah.
we were in the name of freedom again.
So did you have to do a lot of dissociating emotionally,
Right. Yes.
mentally?
Yeah, I think the military in a lot of ways is about dissociation.
Yeah.
And in fact, there is, and while I also say this with the deepest honor for the people that I served with, veterans, for the entire structure of the military, I have deep respect for what it gave me. I am the woman that I am because of it. I chose it. I needed to be a warrioress in this lifetime and to live that archetype out. And the military gave me a chance to do that. And the shadow side of it is that there is a significant amount of brainwashing that has to be done and
Yeah.
programming that has to be done in order for people to want to murder each other. You just have to do that. What I finally realized was it is not in our nature as humans to kill. It's just not. And while you might see that in the animal world for the purpose of food, maybe for the purpose of territory occasionally, the way that we do it as humans, we're just much more advanced than that.
Mhm.
Killing is no longer necessary in our society. And you really have to cause a person to dissociate in a very huge way in order to get them to be part of a system that has that as its mission. I learned that.
Yeah, I'm sure. I've always, it's interesting to me, not to get super political or anything, but to like with when everybody's talking about gun laws and owning their own guns and stuff like that, when I think about the actual act of killing someone with a gun, if, okay, let's say go simple, he breaks into your house, like everybody, thinks like your house, you're defending yourself, you shoot this person, like I've always thought the psychological effects of that for a human who has not been trained, who, has in the military, I assume that you guys have all been trained to try to disassociate and to handle that in a different emotional and mental way than just the general public, that the consequences of that, I don't think everyone always thinks about that when they're thinking
You're like,
like
what if you actually had to use it?
it wrecks my heart and soul
Yeah.
even in defense. And I don't have children, but I obviously defending my family and stuff like that, I want to believe I'd be able to defend, but it's just like the mental and emotional toll that would take on somebody, I just cannot even imagine. And I don't know, I don't think that's talked about enough.
I think if we even back it up one step before that, the concept that I am holding a fear that someone may break into my home, so therefore I need to have a weapon of fatal destruction in order to harm that person. Just the whole train of thought before that comes from this deep fear that I need to protect myself from the other.
Yeah.
And while I honor that we live in the world that we live in, and I know that it's quite a crazy world,
Yeah.
and I'm grateful to have been trained in working with weapons. And do I own a gun? Absolutely not. I do not. I don't need one because instead of that mentality, I would much prefer to believe that my home, my heart, my family are protected divinely by other beings that are way outside of me. And if something along these lines happens, then there is some other alternative out of it.
Yeah.
So a lot of that the what if scenarios really
Yeah.
come from a lot of our deepest fears. And I would say many of our deepest fears are in the collective. And the
Yeah.
military is a part of that. The military is this manifestation of if like WMDs, right? We're like weapons of mass destruction are over there. And of course we go over there and we realize there are no weapons of mass destruction. We've completely created this idea in our minds and I think that there's a way out of that mindset. And it does take intentional work on our own shadows, on our individual shadows, which then impacts the collective so that we can say, you're actually safe. You're safe in your home. Put some really strong locks on the door, put a security system in, and call somebody if somebody breaks in. And you have a nice little egress route, but there's no need to pull out your semi-automatic weapon
Yeah.
in the case of that. And I'm with you. The impacts of that, should it happen, would definitely be much more felt, at
Mhm.
least for a time, for your everyday, like a housewife versus a
Yeah.
warrior.
And
But
it,
even
it dramatically affects all the military, all law enforcement. Like everybody talks about PTSD. And a lot of that, I think, comes from having to kill other people, seeing other people being killed. Like a lot of that, just gruesome, horrible things. And you're doing it in defense, like you said, of the people at home. And you've been trained in that. And you're dramatically affected by it. So yeah, I don't know. I just think it's an interesting concept that I've often thought about. And while I'm not, I don't want to sit here and talk gun rights and all that stuff, but I think that the psychological aspect behind it is just something that's not talked about. So,
I am in favor of peace, and
yes.
I am in favor of walking. I love Mr. Miyagi. Mr. Miyagi says in the Karate Kid, right? You don't learn to fight. Learn to fight so you never have to.
Mm,
That's it.
yeah.
That's the whole thing. Learn how to defend yourself in whatever ways. And for me now, it's much more divine than it is physical because
Mhm.
I'm 5'2" and 120 pounds. Who am I going to take on?
Well, you took on some people.
I learned very quickly that no matter how feisty and fierce I was,
Mhm.
if the dude was 6 feet tall, I was not going to take him down, right? It just
Oh,
wasn't going to happen.
yeah.
So learn to walk. Learn, like Mr. Miyagi says, learn to walk and move around the world as if you are protected, as if you are a fighter, as if you could take that guy down with your pinky. And know that about yourself. And the fact is that people just won't mess with you anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
So you said your world started crumbling during your second deployment. So do you want to dive into that a little bit deeper?
Yes. And oh boy, what a timely conversation this is. And I'm like, ooh, how much shadow do I share on this call?
Mhm.
So during that, I'm deep in some shadow work right now. That is the completion actually of that time. And let's see, what year is it? 2025. Yeah. So it was 12 years ago, 2013, 2014. So I had an affair with a man who was out there in Afghanistan, and he became my ultimately became my partner for 10 years.
Okay.
And we are in the process of completing at least the trauma bonded version of that relationship. And he is now the father of the child that I have. And so that journey was partly because during that time I was questioning everything, my
Mhm.
whole reality, because I grew up in the Methodist church
Okay.
and a bit of the Baptist church as well. My grandfather was a bishop in the Methodist church. I'd been taught very strong values in those systems, and also things that told me that as a woman, I was wrong in some way or sinful.
Mhm.
And so I started to question God and question the Father God that I'd been taught. And all of that imploded into there's nothing. There's just nothing, right? If I can see that man is doing this to each other, and I can witness us harming each other in this way, how could there be any God that would allow this? And so that led me into basically throwing away all morals, right? Moving into like as much of a hedonistic lifestyle as I could and seeking pleasure only because I had been in so much pain for so long that all I wanted was to feel good.
Mhm.
And that led me into, and I would say my partner at the time, into this affair, which not only betrayed our spouses, but also betrayed ourselves and betrayed any kind of connection
Mhm.
with a God. And it really did totally like implode my life in a powerful way. Yeah.
So did you come home from that and own up to it and all of that, or how did that transpire?
Oh man, I there were some side effects of it that caused that caused me to get in trouble in the military.
Okay.
And that then, and of course, I honestly, like, everybody gets in trouble in the military because there's so many rules, it's very easy
Yeah.
to break one of them. But I ended up having this whole kind of saga where I was almost kicked out, and I basically was like, I'm going to leave voluntarily. Just let me go and let me walk out the door with my dignity. And of course, when I look back on it, I realize as a woman, as a feminine being, I am a reflection of a lot of what the men are putting out. Because as a woman, I'm the receiver.
Yeah.
And whatever you put into a woman, she's going to give back to you 10x. Doesn't really matter what it is. So it could be joy, it could be pain, it could be murder, it could be whatever it is. Like, you're going to get that right back because that is our work as sacred divine reflectors of God intelligence. So that process led me into staying in a relationship with that man named Andre, and both my marriage and his marriage falling apart.
Mm.
And I never owned up to it in my marriage. Never did.
Oh,
It was
okay.
totally a secret the whole time. I never owned up to it to his partner. I knew her as well. It was like secret, sorted,
Oh,
all the
wow.
betrayal, all the darkness that you could think of. And I'm like really glad to be able to talk about this now. And realized, and also at the same time was falling genuinely in love with
Mm.
Andre, who I still love deeply.
Mm.
And so but that process, I think, had to do with also the disillusionment of the father God that I had been taught when I was young.
Okay.
We only have a father God. If you only have a male God that is omniscient and he tells you what to do, that whole thing feels pretty dominating,
Yeah. Yeah.
feels pretty authoritative.
Yeah.
So for me, I started to realize, oh, I don't want a God like that. That's not the belief system that I want to live in. And that disillusionment and that whole recalibration of basically, I took Andre and I think a lot of us do this with our partners in general. I took Andre and I made him my God
Mm.
instead.
Okay.
He was a representation of the God, just like my father was my God,
Ah.
my actual father. And I kept trying to personify God in my life. And finally, I was like, I got to go somewhere else because I am in pain. And that's when I started to explore with plant medicines to really start to understand, like, why do I keep trying to find a God outside of me?
Mm.
And it's not being successful. I'm
Mm.
not finding that like perfect male God figure that can just tell me what to do and tell me how to do it. Yeah.
Ah. So, how did you start getting into, as a nice segue into
Yeah.
plant medicine? Now you've explained how you sought it out or why you sought it out. So, what did you do first?
Yeah, I sought it out on some level. Actually, I'll go back. I didn't really seek it out
Okay.
consciously, let's say that.
Okay.
Consciously, I did not. I moved to the Bay Area partially because I had gotten a job there that was wildly surreal. Had a meeting with Sheryl Sandberg at Facebook, and she was like, "Come work at Facebook." And I was like,
Wow.
"Yes, ma'am." So at the time, she was the COO. And I went to go work at Facebook. It was my dream job. Like, I could not believe everything that was happening in my world. It was a different path than what I thought I was going to take. But ultimately, that also got me to be in the same place with Andre. So I was still being drawn to this relationship and was, I want to say, like, selling my soul a little bit to follow this
Mhm.
man. And I think a lot of us tend to do that, at least in the programming that we have in our society as women. So I went there, and at the same time, my sister was going through a very intense process of healing addiction. And what we learned later, and she's given me permission to share part of her story, was that she was sexually assaulted during college, and it led to also a complete sort of implosion of her psyche in a lot of ways, and led her into being diagnosed as borderline. And then they over prescribing her with
Oh,
lots and lots of medications. Some of them were way over prescribed.
oh, wow.
And so that created addiction. And it's the sort of age old story that we know in our society today. So she's having this experience. My heart starts to break for her because she starts to decide that she doesn't want to live anymore. And she's saying that she's going to harm herself. And she ultimately does several times, almost taking her life.
Mm.
And while that's happening, I am in California. She's across the country. While I'm in California, I get introduced to psychedelics
Mhm.
as a recreational, this is my hedonistic phase of life, right?
Yeah.
Woohoo! Let's
You're out of
enjoy.
the military. You're, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, let's have a good time.
Yeah.
There is no God, so I'm just going to be a nihilist and enjoy my life and be here and seek pleasure. And
Mhm.
ultimately, that process led me to LSD and then mushrooms, and also working with a very powerful psychedelic called Bufo at the
Okay.
early stages. Bufo is a plant animal medicine that comes from frogs, the Sonoran desert frog, and then you smoke it and it gives a very powerful like DMT
Okay.
experience. So I'm exploring with LSD, and the first thing that it tells me within minutes of working with it is we're not just here for recreation. And
Mm.
we're not just working with you for recreation. We're working with you because this is medicine. And
Mm.
this is something that can heal not only you, but lots of people. And
Mhm.
you know this, like you already know this in your bones. So go a little deeper. And so that encourages me to go deeper and to actually have a couple of ceremonial experiences.
Okay.
And on another journey with LSD, after I had sat with the powerful DMT in Bufo, I had basically the spiritual awakening moment, although I would say it happened over many experiences, where God came into my energy channel in a tornado of energy. It felt like my entire body disintegrated and said, "You are the perfect connection of these two bloodlines. And here are all the people that made you. And this is why you are exactly perfectly formed
Mm.
to be a healer." And it showed me. And of course, in words, it would take me a whole book to describe all the things, right?
Yeah.
But as a download of a packet of information, I was able to see it in minutes
Mm.
and to witness this whole process of how perfect I am because of all of and that this would be the same for anyone else, all of the people that made me. And that process of realizing that I am a healer is what then led me to understand that these medicines could heal my sister. And that
Mm.
sort of started the journey of, oh my gosh, I actually could work with these for my job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you must have left Facebook at some point to
Yeah.
embark on
Yes.
this. Yes.
But this simultaneously as this is happening, and this is why I also talk about the three phases of awakening, because the first phase of awakening is resistance, right? So there's like the disillusionment. You start to have this moment of disillusionment where you're like, I don't know if I believe in the world around me or my matrix reality that I've created or my ego. But then you have this journey of resistance that usually manifests in your body. So there's often like an autoimmune disorder,
Wow.
some sort of physical pain that starts to happen. So about 3 years after I had started to explore with psychedelics and started to realize that they were actually part of me and it was something that I worked with in a more work setting, not so much just play, I I started to have severe infections in my pelvis. So UTI after UTI. I mean, it was like 7 UTIs in a year,
Oh, wow.
urinary tract infections, and then yeast infection. It was just like everything was just on fire. basically. And that was 2019 until 2020. And that journey of the resistance was finally my body saying, you have to leave this corporate job. So I left Facebook for a job that I had been offered as a chief of staff for a smaller company. Also a dream job. I'd wanted to be a chief of staff and work in the C-suite. And when I got into this job, I realized that the leader was incredibly toxic and was just pretty close to evil. I don't believe in evil, but the just like very dense, dark energy. And of course, with all my karma of betrayal, I'm like, I get it now. I understand why I deserve this.
Oh.
Like, I'm like, okay, karma is like instant karma, right? She's coming back and being like, Susannah, you got to clean up your messes, and you're going to stay in this cycle of dark and shadow and being with these authoritative male figures until you realize who you are and you really
Mm.
awaken yourself, right? And you open yourself. And so my body started to resist, and that lasted about a year until I paid attention
Mm.
and left all of those jobs. And then I went for a full year, really without a job. I started to work on building a project that lasted a little while. And I was here and there. I trained as a coach. I started to get people started to come to me as
Mm.
a facilitator. And they were like, I feel like you could take me on my first journey with
Ah.
plant medicine. And I was like, me? Are you? So that to me is when you start to know, and that's the next phase is really surrender,
Mm.
trust and surrender, because surrender requires trust. And as you surrender into what is happening, and you're like, okay, like I got let go from my corporate job because I told the guy I wouldn't lie anymore. Like my body is clearly in severe pain. My sister's process is getting worse. Like all these things are coming down. There's nothing I can do. So I'm just going to surrender to the weight of them.
Which is so hard to do.
Hard to
It's
do, but it's
scary.
I think it's like playing uncle with the universe, where
Yeah.
they've got your like arm behind your back and they're like, okay, like, how about now? How about now?
Yeah.
How about now? So ultimately, that it took me a while of playing uncle with the universe to
Yeah.
surrender. And then that led me into just saying, you know what? I actually think I am here to serve these medicines and to offer spaces for healing for people and just claim it and own it.
That's so interesting to me too, that like when I think back to the beginning of the conversation where you were talking about your first epiphany in Afghanistan of watching that trying to kill that guy, like of course that went against everything in your being because if you were meant to be a healer and then you're out there killing people, oh, that's so interesting to me. I think yeah, that was
The
early
mind,
on stuff that was
it's like
coming
a
up for you.
record scratch, right? It's like that doesn't feel right. And it's because in this lifetime I was meant to really step more into priestess work
Mhm.
and into peace. Like being, I say now, it's like a warrior for peace because you really do have to fight for peace. You still have to be strategic. You still have to learn
Mhm.
how to, there's a bit of a battle space in order to really hold the anchor of peace. But most people are afraid of it. And I was afraid of it. I was deeply afraid of peace because
Mm.
it was so unknown to me.
That's deep. Yeah. So obviously some of the psilocybin stuff, the plant medicine, like all this stuff is still taboo. I think it's becoming more understood a little bit more. I'm in Colorado, so we've decriminalized mushrooms, at least here. But for those who are listening who are maybe unsure, if they've heard of microdosing, they've heard of LSD and mushrooms, and even I did an episode on ayahuasca with a guy, like all those things. Will you talk a little bit about that? Like just explaining it to people and how it can help people and what it does to the brain and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes, I will. Because I went into it with all of those sort of mental blocks. I went into it with all of the stories of the war on drugs. These are drugs. They're going to make your brain go crazy and you're going to jump out of a third-story window.
Mm.
All of that, which had been perpetuated and propagated, particularly during the Nixon, what am I thinking of, administration,
Yeah.
because and the reason for that, I want to give a little bit of background as to why these medicines were so demonized. It's not because it's not because they were actually harmful. It's because, or objectively harmful to the human. It's because people were dropping out of the war effort for
Mm.
Vietnam because they were waking up working with LSD and mushrooms, and it was causing them to say, I don't want to participate in that.
Yeah.
And from the government perspective, that is treasonous because we need you in the war effort to fight for this agenda. And ultimately, that process allows us to just remember that it's not the essence of the medicine itself
Mm.
that was dangerous. And after working with LSD the first time, I realized, A, there's absolutely nothing to be afraid of.
Mm.
Nothing to be afraid of. In fact, when they say it bonds to your DNA and they can find it 20 years after you're dead, I was like, great, I want that. Fantastic. I choose this. I would like this to be a part of me forever. And then I started on a journey of working with various medicines. And so I've worked with many: LSD, psilocybin, mushrooms, 5-MeO DMT, as I mentioned, ayahuasca, San Pedro. I'm like, what else? What else is in the list? Those are some of the master teacher plants. And then, of course, we have others like Bobinsana and Kanna and White Lily and things like that that are ally plants. But we'll stick to the master plants right now. And what I'll say is what they do primarily, more than anything else on a neurological level, is they quiet the default mode network of the brain. The default mode network of the brain is the part of the brain that's the pattern-based part, that is the part that when you get in the car, you take your left hand, you put the seatbelt across you, you click it in, you put your hands on the steering wheel, put your right foot on, you know how to do that.
It's like muscle memory.
Muscle memory. And
Mm.
it's basically unconscious, right?
Mm.
It's not
Yeah.
even in your conscious mind. It's just something that you have done so many times, and you've taken that neural pathway. The serotonin has taken that neural pathway so many times that there's a groove. It's like
Mm.
the 405 in LA. It's like the 405 in your brain.
Yeah.
And when we do, that causes us to have the same conversations. It causes us to tell the same stories. It causes us to tell the same stories in the same way from the same perspective, right?
Yeah.
Both to ourselves and others. And ultimately, that process means that there's a whole part of the brain that's operating, but then there's all these other parts of the brain that are not.
Mm.
And those are the parts that are creative.
Mm.
Those are the creative centers of the brain. So when the plants help us to quiet the default mode network, they also help us to activate and connect and take the serotonin on the back roads. That's what I'd
Okay.
say, like taking a detour. And so the serotonin will then bring these neurons from parts of the brain that usually aren't talking.
Mm.
And ultimately, what you get is heightened creativity, greater ease towards solving problems that you've been having the same problem because you've literally been hitting your head against a wall over and over again, trying to do the same thing and being like, why am I stuck?
And we're very much creatures of habit, right? So it's very easy to fall into those patterns of just doing the same thing over and over.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's one reason why our society gets stuck, even because we've built the structure the way it is. And especially when something gets so big, like a governmental system, for example, to turn it into a new pathway or to bring change
Yeah.
takes decades.
And
right?
change
Which
is
is
scary for a lot of people. So,
so
because we're
scary.
creatures of habit.
And this is why we are called Metamorphosis Ventures and House of Embodied Metamorphosis, because
Yeah.
metamorphosis is so critical right now. It is so needed. And in order to get these pathways to see each other, we often need some help. And
Mm,
we need help not necessarily from the outside. There's a lot of external processes that you can go through, EMDR, nonviolent
yeah.
communication, neurolinguistic programming, all these different kinds of coaching mechanisms, which are helpful, especially in the integration. But what we've learned is, and what I learned, especially in the research that I did, so you read about entheogenerated is the research I did. The reason it's called entheogenerated is because these plants are also called entheogens. And I like the word entheogen better than psychedelic because psychedelic focuses on the psyche, right? It's
Yeah.
much more rooted in the mind. And then entheogen means the God within.
Okay.
And so there are three things that cause these medicines to be very effective. One is they give you this sense of interconnectedness.
Mm,
They help you feel connected to all things. And during that first journey I took with LSD, I watched all the trees breathe in
mm.
harmony with my body. I literally saw it happen.
That's really
And
cool.
I was like, oh my God, our planet is alive. Duh. Of course, our planet's alive. But I saw it. I viscerally experienced the aliveness, and I experienced myself as part of the aliveness. So there's interconnection, interconnectedness. The second is acceptance of self and tough emotions. So
Mm,
they help us to integrate, like I was mentioning, and now I can talk about the ways in which I've betrayed others. I can talk about the ways in which I harmed and the way I was brainwashed or programmed and did these things that were harmful. That is the second tendency that these plants help us with. The third is direct experience or mystical experience, direct experience of the divine or mystical experience.
wow.
And that is you meet God, whatever your version of God is,
Mhm.
which we believe in decentralized spirituality. So, whatever your version is right, and you get to meet your version of God.
I love that. So, have you worked with people doing like the big trips and the microdosing type trips?
Yes, yes, we
Okay.
do. Yeah, we do both because
Yeah.
we deeply believe in they're both good stewards of different outcomes.
Yeah.
So, macro dosing, or what we often work with, are heroic doses, right? 3 to 4 grams plus in a bigger container of either in a retreat or one-on-one with one of our facilitators. In a macro dose, you're going to be going completely immersed in the experience, and you will have a big opening experience where you will go deeper into divine and you'll be able to connect with whatever that entity is or whatever that belief you have is. And you'll also be able to recalibrate some of your limiting beliefs that
Mm,
are in your psyche, right? You'll be able to create those new neural pathways in a very profound kind of opening way. But that only lasts like it's one day. So it's
yeah.
maybe 10 hours of that experience, and then you're coming down on the next day. So you have that experience. Yes, it changes you, but then you've got to live it out in your daily reality.
Mm,
That's where the metamorphosis method is important because not only do we prepare you for that, so the first phase is preparation, then the experience of the macro dose, and then finally is integration. And that's where we really like microdosing. It tends to be very effective in the integration, sometimes in the preparation as well. If
okay.
people are nervous about or anxious about the medicine, because your body can get to know it a little bit.
Yeah.
What I find is microdosing is really effective after a macro dose
Okay.
in the months following or a year following, because then you get a little taste of a reconnection with the experience of the macro, and
Mm,
then you can bring it down into your life
mm,
and walk the path on a daily ritual, for example.
So if someone is just newly interested in microdosing, because I think it's becoming very trendy right now too, of everybody talking about it, and I've dabbled in it myself a little bit. But for me, like I'm not somebody that I never was super into drugs like when I was younger and stuff like that. I never experimented with that stuff in like college like a lot of people did. And so when I was in a dark place and I'm like, oh, this is something I want to try instead of like antidepressants or something like that, it was very hard to figure out how where to even get them. That was another thing that was very challenging for me because I didn't have a network of people I could get them from,
Yeah.
right?
Where does one acquire these?
Yeah,
Yes.
so I've actually had a few of these conversations with a couple friends. So this is why I'm asking. Like for somebody who is newly interested in microdosing, interested in wanting to try it, what advice would you give them for
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. It's funny because now that I'm in this world, I feel like everyone I know, it's everywhere. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, there's gummies, there's chocolates, there's all these different ways. But I will say in this moment, you came to the right place because we do offer the sacrament that we work with, our community-based medicine, Trinity, that for donate, oh, words are hard so sometimes or donation to our organization, House of Embodied Metamorphosis. So you can actually order it online and we will ship it to you. And I
And
would
it's a
say,
good, reliable, clean, safe situation.
yeah, and I'll share my commitment,
Mm.
my deep devotion to cleanliness, not just energetically, but also physically, to know that what is in this medicine is exactly what you are getting. One of my dear friends and just a man that was very important in my life died last year of a
So
fentanyl
sorry.
overdose,
Oh.
not knowing that the
Mm.
pill that he had taken had fentanyl. And I
Oh.
have so many people in my world that are one, especially 1 degree separated, 2 degrees separated, who have died of fentanyl. That the crisis of drugs and what you mentioned, we live in a world where really medicine is drugs and drugs are medicine,
Yes.
where I believe that these plant medicines truly are medicine. And a lot of the things that we consider to be medicine or medication are actually drugs.
Mm.
And so much of our, especially like pressed pill world, things like that are infiltrated with some of these harmful chemicals that really are fatal. And so it's more important to me than ever before to ensure the cleanliness of the medicine that we work with. So Trinity is grown within our team. We know who grows it. We know how it's grown. It's played music. It's prayed over. It is blessed. It is honored by
Mm.
our community. It is sacramental. This is not your average mushroom chocolate that you're going to get from your buddy down the street who baked it in his house.
Yeah.
But there are also a lot of organizations that are now popping up that are both protected by churches that do offer it that way. We, in our world, choose not to put our sacrament in any kind of edible thing other than a capsule
Okay.
because of children, because of safety for children.
Mm.
Because if children see a gummy or children see chocolate, and I
Yes.
have a 3-month-old boy, so I can only imagine how frightening that would be for a
Yeah.
child to ingest something that they didn't know what the outcome was going to be, and then for it to change them. And so that it's very important to us that everyone have consent for what they're ingesting. And
Yeah.
we're also working right now on a laboratory that will be able to test all of the things in our medicine. So you'll get a full readout of all the ingredients that are in it. Because even in a psilocybin mushroom, even when you just look at the mushroom that's just been grown out of the dirt, there's like 100 ingredients in it.
Yeah.
So we don't add anything else. We don't add lion's mane or niacin or any of those other activators because we believe, and we have also communed with the medicine and asked how it wants to be served, and it wants to be served as authentically cleanly itself. And it has its own consciousness. So we listen.
Yeah, that's so funny. So I did order at one point because I was like, I don't know where to get this. I don't know what to do. So I did order a chocolate bar online, and I'm not going to say from where because I don't think these people want that known. But
Uh-huh.
but I ordered it and then it came in the mail. And my husband was like, "Oh, what's that?" And I was like, "Oh, that's my like mushroom chocolate." He was like, "You ordered drugs on the internet?" And I was,
Like, yes, I did. I did that.
yeah, I did. And yeah, you're probably right. I probably should have dug a little bit deeper into because it wasn't a specific website for that necessarily. But I
Mm,
was okay. Everything was fine. The
good.
chocolate was okay. It was fine. But it was a really funny conversation I had with my husband where he was just like, "You're ordering drugs on the internet." Like,
Yes,
I think
it's everywhere.
yeah.
It's
And
everywhere.
knowing
You can.
everything you just shared, I think will make listeners feel a lot more comfortable with doing that and having a good resource that's not the weirdo down the street that's selling drugs. I think that's really cool.
This
I will,
is the supply of it is one of the biggest challenges that
yeah,
we have, right? Is
yeah.
that we are limited by where you live, right?
Mhm.
And now I could rattle off probably five or six companies that I know of that sell them online typically, and you can buy them, and they're great. Even in
Mhm.
chocolate bars, things like that are, I deeply believe in a lot of the integrity of these organizations. What we choose to work with, because, and this is where I'll go into 508c1a, as a 508c1a faith-based organization, which is technically the designation of a church, we have the protection of the RFRA, which is the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which allows us to serve sacramental medicine.
Okay.
And so we like to keep it sacramental. If we are offering this, and when you do donate for it on our site, you agree to become a virtual member of our community. We'll sign you up for some of our newsletters so you can stay updated on the events. We give you opportunities to go to free integration calls. There's all sorts of things that we do to support you in that process of ingesting the sacrament. And the idea is that it's being used or being ingested sacramentally in a ritualistic way, because we want to have reverence for the medicine. It's not just, I'm going to take a part of a gummy or a part of a chocolate bar and go on a hike. Although sacrament can absolutely be worked with on a hike.
Yeah.
But just recognize that it is designed for a certain amount of work. A lot of people work with it to get off of antidepressants.
Yeah.
A lot of people are working with it in their daily devotional practice. There's all sorts of ways of doing it.
And I think that's it too, is like people are afraid of not doing it the right way or not knowing how to do it. And like I said, there's not a ton of internet research and stuff that you can find on it because it's still illegal. But I don't know, having somebody to guide you through that is huge, I think. I knew somebody who had to do his own microdosing of LSD and mushroom journey because he asked his therapist, he said, "I don't want to be on these drugs anymore, the antidepressants. I want to try this. Can you help me?" And she was like, "No, I can't because I'll get in trouble." And so he did. He had to just do it all himself and experiment himself. And
Yeah.
to have a resource like that where somebody can walk you through it, like when you're like, "I don't know what dose I should do. I don't know if I should do a macro dose or a micro dose." I think that's really awesome that you guys are doing that. And
I'm glad you bring this up, because there's so many people who have now been the sort of tip of the spear of this. Okay, I guess I'll just go out into the Wild West
yeah,
and explore on my own, because a lot of these therapists and healthcare providers can't help
yeah.
me. But I also know that there's something here for me. So what we've also created is a short, very easy to access course called Mindful Microdosing,
Okay.
which goes along with. And so if you order one of the kits, you can also go over. We have two organizations, one that holds the integration and the coaching. That's our corporation, our LLC, Metamorphosis Ventures. And then one that works in the protection of the sacrament, which is House of Embodied Metamorphosis. And they're both connected, so you can easily access them. But
Mm.
Metamorphosis Ventures has Mindful Microdosing, which is 6-part online course, which allows you to design your ideal protocol,
Mm.
understand the dosage that's in each capsule, design your ritual that you do. And then you get several different techniques on how to move through some of the emotions and some of the experiences that are going to come up as you are microdosing. Because inevitably, that's the whole point of it, is to create these moments of emotional expression or emotional purging. And we want to give you all the tools to work with that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I will link all of that in the show notes. So if anybody listening is interested in working with Susannah and her company and all the things, we'll link all that in the show notes. I think this is such a good conversation. And I wish that I could keep going and have more
I
and
know.
more.
I'll say one more thing about microdosing because I feel like my own experience with it and then the experience of my family. So to share, after my sister was was trying to harm herself, eventually I was able to persuade my lawyerly family. Both of my parents are attorneys. So that's one of the reasons I did the research I did, was really to give to them so that they could see the research and to convince them that it was something that would be helpful for my sister. And what happened was we did two ceremonies with her, and after the second ceremony, she was clear. She was no longer trying to harm herself. And from there, she also worked with microdosing, and so did my mother, both to get off of antidepressants. And they
Mm,
both did. And the same thing for myself. While I haven't been on antidepressants, it's gotten me through postpartum. It's gotten me through so many dark seasons. So I'd say, yeah, it's meaningful to me to
mm.
work with these sacred plants.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm so glad you're bringing this into the world and you found your purpose in this world.
Yeah. There's a lot of noise out there that'll try to
Yeah.
draw you into 25 different places.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing we do. We have a powerful purpose course on finding your purpose, because once you find your purpose and you are connected to it, that's when you start to really open up and be able to like speak and connect and find your people.
Yeah.
So you're on that journey, keep going because it's
Yeah.
worth it. Oh,
Oh.
and the last phase of awakening is play.
Mm,
And so once you surrender to that whole process, you get to just play. That's what living in your purpose is. Everything becomes playful and
mm.
enjoyable.
Oh, amazing. Susannah, this has been an amazing conversation, and I feel like we could talk about this all day long, but I do have to sort of shut it down for a minute. But do you have any final words, parting words for my listeners?
Trust yourself.
Mm,
Yeah. Trust your inner knowing and your intuition, that little tiny voice that is in the back of all the noise. You are not crazy. We are in a great awakening. You do have a purpose, and you are meant to find your God within
mm.
and live that purpose out.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story and being vulnerable with that in the first half of this. You went through a lot, and I can tell that you are a beautiful soul. So I'm glad that you found your way out of it all and you're doing your main purpose in life and everything. So thank you so much for coming on here and sharing all of that. I really appreciate it.
Oh, so wonderful to be here, Tani. Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.